The twin moons of Syraxis, Prime, hung low in the sky as transport pods touched down on the frost-lined landing field. Snow crunched beneath taloned feet, segmented limbs, and boots from dozens of worlds. Students of the prestigious Galactic University emerged from the ships, wrapped in thermal suits or radiating their own biological heat. It was day 15 of the Advanced Survival Environments course, and today's lesson would be unlike any before. Professor Vor, a towering Zeltron whose crystalline skin refracted the light in subtle hues, floated above the field on a grav disk. His voice, harmonized in chords that translated into speech via embedded translators, echoed across the crowd. You will construct a functional shelter using nothing but the environment around you. No tools, no energy sources, no AIs. You have until the next moonrise. A ripple of alarm passed through the students. Did he say no tools? Hissed Carix, a scaled, bipedal tactician from the Ms. Concord. His four arms twitched nervously. Beside him, the human student, Cade Walker, stretched and yawned. Sounds fun. Carix blinked at him, eyes narrowing. Fun? This is absurd. We are not primitive. What functional structure could possibly be built with nothing? Depends on what you know, Cade said, shouldering his empty pack. As students were assigned coordinates and scattered toward their individual zones, Professor Vor's assistant approached him. You placed a human in the northern pine cluster? Intentionally, Vor replied. I am curious. Cade's assigned zone was a sparse pine forest, the trees tall, straight, and dusted with snow. A light wind blew from the east, dry and biting. The terrain was rocky in places, but filled with potential. He knelt beside a fallen branch and examined its grain. Good. Softwood. Splits easy. He pulled off his gloves and felt the bark of a standing pine. Years of weekend camping, survivalist YouTube channels, and a few grueling months in Alaska came flooding back. He wasn't special, just practiced. And Earth had given him an unfair advantage. Hardship, history, and a culture that sometimes romanticized struggle. Cade began by collecting deadfall branches, setting them in sorted piles by thickness. Then, he located a natural rise, a slight hill that would help with drainage, and began to clear the snow, using a flat stone as a makeshift shovel. He worked methodically, stripping bark, collecting moss, testing trees with strategic kicks to fell those weakened by rot. His breath steamed in the cold, but he smiled. This wasn't a survival test. It was a weekend hobby with higher stakes. Across the forest, chaos unfolded. Carix attempted to construct a windbreak from interlaced branches, but the materials snapped under their own weight. His calculations didn't account for brittle bark. Lumra, giant blue-skin brune, opted for brute strength. He tore trees from the ground and tried to stack them into a pyramid. One log rolled off and nearly crushed his foot. Nivex, an insectoid from the hive world of Trevix, began burrowing instinctively into the frozen soil. Progress was slow, and the cold seeped through her carapace. Overhead, Professor Vor observed silently from his levitating platform. His crystalline tendrils adjusted the magnification lenses focused on Cade's zone. What he saw disturbed him. The human had stripped the bark clean off long saplings and was fashioning cordage. He was locking logs together with notched joints, notched by stone wedges and fire-hardened sticks. Already, a small structure was taking shape. This level of progress, in less than 4 hours? Vor muttered. Perhaps he smuggled in forbidden tech, his assistant suggested. No, Vor replied. He is simply human. As dusk began to fall, Cade had erected 4 solid walls interlocked at the corners. Gaps were stuffed with moss and snowpack bark for insulation. He had selected flattish stones to line a fire pit near the back, with an opening for smoke to vent up and out through a carefully arranged channel between the logs. He struck his fire with a bow drill of wood and sinew, and after several failed attempts, flames sparked to life. By the time the first stars appeared, the cabin was aglow with warmth. Inside, Cade sat back on a mat of pine needles, chewing a protein bar from his pocket, watching the shadows dance. Not bad for no tools, he whispered, satisfied. High above, Professor Vor stared at the footage, frozen. This is not a student project. This is ancestral memory turned into architecture. And for the first time in decades, Vor, the galaxy's leading survival instructor, felt something alien in his cold, crystalline chest. Doubt. By the time the distant sun crept above the icy horizon, Cade's shelter stood like a relic from a forgotten Earth century. Tight-jointed logs, packed moss insulation, and faint trails of smoke rising from a vented fire pit. He'd even scraped frost off the interior walls using the edge of a flat stone, making the space inside feel warmer and drier than any alien structure within kilometers. He awoke at dawn, stretched, and ducked outside. The cold bit his face, but the air was clean and calm. With practiced ease, he checked the structure for frost cracks, adjusted the chimney vent with a wedge of bark, and added more wood to the fire inside. Then he just stood still and listened to the groaning trees, to the wind. He could hear something else, too, frustration echoing from the surrounding forest. In Carrick's clearing, the situation was grim. The reptilian student had calculated everything. He had drafted his design in the snow, angles, wind resistance, heat retention. But numbers hadn't helped when his materials broke mid-construction. His makeshift lean-to had partially collapsed in the night, leaving him exposed on one side. He shivered violently as he tried to rebuild it. His claws scraped ineffectively at the frozen soil. "Tools," he hissed. "We should have been allowed tools." A kilometer away, Lumra the Brune wiped sweat and ice from his ridged forehead. His original design, a towering pile of felled logs, had crumbled in the night. Without cordage, the logs wouldn't stay aligned. He had even tried fusing them with brute strength, smashing one log into another until the end splintered. Now he sat slumped beside a shallow cave of fallen branches, teeth chattering despite his thick hide. The shelter blocked some wind, but it was little more than a glorified pile of firewood. Nivex fared no better. Her natural instinct was to burrow, but she hadn't accounted for the density of the frozen ground. Her tunnel only extended a few meters and had no insulation. Her chitin was rimmed with frost. When the internal hive link in her mind failed to provide guidance, panic bloomed in her chest. Professor Vor observed everything from his cloaked observation node above the tree canopy. He watched with growing concern as more students floundered. This was not failure from laziness. It was failure from inexperience. For many of them, survival meant relying on scanners, replicators, plasma tools, and AI companions. But not the human. His structure had improved overnight. Vor leaned forward as Cade adjusted a new element, a chimney shield made from split bark and stone, channeling airflow to prevent backdraft. Inside the cabin, heat radiated evenly. Cade had also begun constructing a simple rack, small sticks lashed with bark strips, mounted above the fire to dry spare moss and gloves. No tools, no fusion welds, not even a blade, Vor murmured. And yet, he brought up comparison footage of the other students. None had built anything even close to this level of function. Many were near hypothermic. Some had retreated to emergency hibernation to conserve energy. A few were improvising second shelters in desperation. "Is this mere instinct?" his assistant asked. "What does a human know this?" "It is not instinct alone," Vor answered. "It is culture. Knowledge passed through stories, experience, even games. On Earth, they call it bushcraft. They teach children how to survive in forests just for fun." His tendrils shivered. "They simulate hardship for entertainment." Back on the ground, Cade stepped outside to gather more wood. He moved smoothly, even casually, humming as he worked. Every stick was selected with care, dry, light, long-burning. His breath fogged the air as he stacked them outside his door in a neat triangle. He paused to scan the tree line. In the distance, he saw Nivex stumbling from her pit, covered in frost. Lumra sat motionless under his collapsed structure. Carrick was pacing in tight circles, his posture rigid with rage. They were failing, not because they weren't intelligent, but because they'd never had to do this. Cade didn't gloat. Instead, he picked up a few extra branches and stripped the bark. He tied off another section of cordage, then glanced toward the nearest drone in the sky and gave it a mock salute. Still time to build a second one, he muttered with a grin. At the edge of his command interface, Professor Vor received an alert. Student human Cade Walker, shelter status. Excellent. Vital signs. Rested. Morale. High. He tapped a crystalline claw on the console. When aliens face cold, they wait for tools to save them. When humans face cold, they build fire. The observation platform went quiet, and as the sun rose higher over the frostbitten forest, one log cabin stood defiant against the elements. Warm, dry, hand-built by a creature who'd once called this sort of challenge a weekend hobby. By the time the second sun rose above the horizon, a bitter wind had swept across the coniferous forest. The temperature plummeted, but inside his cabin, Cade Walker stirred lazily. The fire crackled in the stone-lined pit, its warmth radiating through the moss-lined walls. He sat up, stretched, and added a few pieces of wood to the flame. Then he leaned back and waited. He knew what came next. The inspection. Hovering above the trees, Professor Vor activated the intercom system. Shelter evaluations begin now. Remain at your shelter site. Do not attempt repairs or modifications. Observation drones will record final results. Cade stepped outside his cabin and leaned against the doorway, arms folded. He caught glimpses of distant drones descending toward each student's location. Thin beams of light scanned structures, logged heat signatures, structural integrity, and biological readings. The first report came in from Carrick's zone. Structure integrity, 22%. Exposure level, high. Students suffered minor hypothermia. Verdict, failed shelter. Carrick glared at the hovering drone, his tail lashing in the snow. I did the math, he growled. This wasn't supposed to happen. Next was Lumra. His shelter, what remained of it, was now half buried under snow. The logs had shifted in the night, opening a gap wide enough for wind to cut straight through. He had taken refuge behind a rock outcrop, using his own body heat to survive. Structure integrity, 12%. Insufficient coverage. Student exposed to low temperatures for 6 hours. Verdict, failed shelter. Lumra grunted, but said nothing. His massive hands curled into fists. Survival wasn't something he was used to failing. Nivex was in worse shape. Her burrow had collapsed during the night freeze, and she had spent the early morning trying to dig out, her limbs sluggish from the cold. Structure integrity, 0%. Students suffered critical energy loss. Emergency biometrics activated. Verdict, shelter not achieved. Nivex stood silently, her antennae lowered in shame. She hadn't even built anything that could be called a shelter. Then the drone reached Cade. It hovered above the log cabin, scanning the structure. Infrared revealed the interior was a consistent 21 degrees Celsius room temperature. The chimney vented smoothly, with no signs of smoke buildup. The walls were straight and tight, corner notches precisely cut with crude wedges, the insulation expertly placed. Inside were 2 moss-lined sleeping sections and a drying rack. Even the fire pit was lined in such a way that it protected the logs from radiant heat damage. Structure integrity, 97%. Interior comfort level, optimal. Smoke filtration, functional. Resource efficiency, extremely high. Verdict, shelter exceeds expectations. A moment of silence followed. Then, from across the forest, alien students began converging on Cade's location. Word had spread quickly. By the time Professor Vor arrived with his floating platform, nearly every student had gathered in a semicircle before the human's cabin. They stood in stunned silence. It has a door, Carrick muttered. And heat, Lumra added. And airflow. And space, Nivex whispered. Cade stepped forward casually. Come on in, he said, holding the door open. Plenty of room. I even made a second moss mat. They hesitated. Then, slowly, one by one, the aliens stepped into the cabin. Their reaction was immediate. Eyes widened. Mandibles twitched. Scaled shoulders relaxed. Warmth flooded over them like a wave. This is impossible, Carrick said finally, turning toward Cade. You had no tools. No assistance. How? Cade shrugged. It's called Bushcraft. Earth's got entire communities built around this kind of thing. Some folks do it just for fun. For fun, Nivex echoed. Yeah, We watch shows about it, read books. People compete to build stuff like this in the wild. It's kind of a hobby. Lumra frowned. But you're a species with starships and antimatter drives. Why waste time learning primitive skills? Cade smiled. Because we don't forget where we came from. Comfort is temporary. Nature doesn't care what tech you have. You either know how to survive or you don't. The room fell quiet. Outside, Professor Ver stood watching, his crystalline face unreadable. Then he activated a private channel to the Galactic University Council. Human student Cade Walker has achieved a superior result in primitive survival conditions. Recommend reclassification of humanity's cultural threat potential. Their adaptability exceeds projections. He paused, then added in a quiet tone. One student, one night, and he builds civilization from frost and bark. Inside the cabin, Cade sat by the fire, offering a strip of dried rations to Lumra and smiling faintly at the stunned faces around him. He wasn't showing off. He was just being human. Professor Vor floated silently above the log cabin, the soft hum of his grav disc the only sound beyond the crackling fire inside. He observed the alien students seated around Cade, basking in warmth and quiet awe. The human had done more than build a shelter. He had shifted a paradigm. Inside, Cade continued answering questions, calmly, humbly. How did you get the chimney to draw smoke so efficiently? Asked Carix. Cade pointed to the slight inward slope of the stones. Smoke rises naturally. All I had to do was give a place to go. The angle helps pull air through the fire and up out the vent. Lumra touched the wall. It's warm, not just the air. The wood is holding heat. Insulation, Cade said. Moss between the logs traps the warmth. Old trick from Northern Earth tribes. Kept them alive during long winters. Nivex, still stunned, said nothing. She sat close to the fire, her antennae twitching at every shift in temperature. This is not a structure, Carix muttered. It's engineering, without any tools. No, Professor Vor said aloud as he entered the cabin, voice calm but heavy. This is what happens when survival is not a reaction, but a tradition. All heads turned toward him. Cade rose from his seat, respectfully nodding. Professor Vor stepped forward and looked around slowly, taking in every detail. Then, his gaze locked onto Cade. You have redefined the parameters of this exercise. Cade scratched the back of his neck. Didn't mean to. I just did what I was taught. That, Vor said, is the most concerning part. The aliens exchanged confused glances. Vor turned to the group. You all failed not because you lacked intellect, but because you relied on intellect alone. Logic without experience. Design without instinct. The human succeeded because his people still train for this kind of thing. He looked to Cade. Your culture simulates hardship. Cade nodded. In some places, yeah. Wilderness survival camps. Solo treks. Some folks even live off-grid just to prove they can. Even though you have advanced technology? Nivex asked. Especially because we do, Cade said with a shrug. Tech fails. Batteries die. Satellites go down. The one thing you can always rely on is what you know with your hands. A long silence followed. Professor Ver finally spoke again. I have been teaching this course for over 2 centuries. In that time, I have seen brilliant designs, clever adaptations, but never this. He gestured to the structure. You created not only shelter, but security, sustainability, and comfort, all from the wild. Cade lowered his eyes slightly. I wasn't trying to prove anything. Just trying to sleep through the night. That is what makes it terrifying, Ver said softly. He turned and tapped a crystalline device on his wrist. A low chime sounded, the signal for course debrief. Students, return to the main campus. Your scores will be logged. Dismissed. One by one, the aliens stepped out of the cabin, heads still spinning, minds changed. They glanced back often, at Cade, at the cabin, at each other. Respect had replaced doubt. When the last student was gone, Vor remained. You will receive top marks, he said. But know this, you've shaken more than just your classmates. The council will see this report. They will see you. Cade raised a brow. See me as what? As a warning, or a possibility. Later that day, back aboard the orbital campus, Vor compiled his formal report. Galactic University internal memo, eyes only. Subject, human cultural capabilities, survivalism. Summary. Subject Cade Walker constructed a fully insulated, heated log cabin using no tools, no artificial aids, and completed the structure overnight. Results suggest that human baseline cultural knowledge includes pre-technological engineering and adaptive bushcraft. Implication. Human survivability is not dependent on civilization. It is civilization. Remove their tech, and they build it again. Recommendation. Immediate review of humanity's threat classification. Their resilience is not just biological. It is cultural, generational, and voluntary. He paused before adding the final note. If this is what one unarmed human can do in one night, what could 100 do in 1 week? That night, in his cabin aboard the student dormitory ring, Cade received a soft ping from his tablet. It was a message from Carix. Would you be willing to teach me how to make rope from bark? He smiled. A second ping, this one from Lumra. What trees are best for notching logs? Then Nivex. I think I want to learn how to make fire from scratch. Cade leaned back in his chair, hand behind his head. He had come to Galactic University expecting to learn from the best. He hadn't expected to become the benchmark.